Shadowrun Dragonfall is a standalone expansion to Shadowrun Returns, but since it's been marketed like a game, we're going to look at it like a game. If you don't already know, Shadowrun is a turn-based strategy game filled with RPG elements such as choice-based dialogue, as well as character creation and customization. The thing that allows Dragonfall to stand out from Returns is that its campaign is almost twice as long as the original, features open quest hubs, and removes the linearity of getting a quest, being teleported to the location, and then being teleported back without any choice or say in the matter. This time around, you actually get to have a permanent team as well, instead of hiring the generic NPCs that you never get to talk to like in Returns. The gameplay here is one and the same with Returns though. Your typical turn and cover based strategy game with abilities and characters inspired by the world of Shadowrun. The intensity of the fights for a turn based strategy game is actually surprising. You can have a Decker hacked into the Matrix and fighting off hordes of defense programs that might even kill him in real life, while the rest of your team is trying to protect his actual body and themselves from hordes all the same in real life. It's a lot of fun, but this time around with the extended campaign length, it's very repetitive. Shadowrun Dragonfall features far less choices of how to go about things than Returns did. While you can avoid certain confrontations, most jobs and situations you get into will end in a fight no matter what. This game loves to force you into combat and spam groups of 12 enemies per room at your 4-man squad. The entire last mission of the game was 4 levels of unit spam. Because of this, the gameplay, while fun, does become tedious very quickly, and even disappointing if you were hoping for more options for diplomacy or tricks that could help you avoid combat or manipulate others into fighting for you or something like that. One good thing I did love now, though, is that your permanent companions can be used to fulfill skill checks that you yourself cannot make. For example, you need something decked or need a wall broken down, but you're just a weak, not tech-savvy shaman? Your teammates can fulfill these skill checks for you. Sounds great, right? Well, there's a catch. The catch is, while they did implement this well-desired feature, they only did it for about 2/3 of the skill checks in the game. There are plenty that just lack the option for no apparent reason. Find a wall you can knock over with your troll? Great! Well, 2 levels from now, you're going to find a wall that she won't be able to help you with. No explanation given. Okay. Movement outside of combat is still turn-based, unfortunately, so be careful about running around because you may enter a fight and find none of your team has AP because they lost all of it running up to the fight. The story really stood out to me for most of the game. I've never seen a game story do quite what this one does. From the very first level, you're given an antagonist, but that antagonist changes like 3 different times. And the one you finally find out to be the main antagonist of the game? It's also the most boring character you meet in the entire game. And what's worse is that everything the antagonist does is so generic and so easily predictable that you know how it's gonna end an hour in advance. The addition of so many interesting side quests, on top of generic boring ones, was definitely a treat though. There's actually this one side quest that was easily the best side quest I've ever done in a video game. Let's just say you find a nerd who hasn't gone outside for 2 years, who has watched a horrible fantasy show every day in that time. You can find recordings of him watching it with the soundtrack blaring, and then if you choose to help him, you end up getting attacked later by an overwhelming force, but you do get some very interesting support from him. It's just another nice RPG choice you get to make, and I do love the amount of choices you do get to make, especially with the addition of permanent companions and quests for those companions. But what sucks is that every choice you make up until the end of the game carries absolutely no impact on your ending. There's only 3 choices that affect your ending in any notable manner that I found. They're all made in the last 3 hours of the game. And the one with the biggest effect is a decision made through one line of dialogue in the last 2 minutes of it, with 0 explanation, 0 chance to look for an explanation, just a choice and a giant paragraph of text in what is honestly the most disappointing ending to a video game I have ever seen. But no, I haven't played No Man's Sky, so that probably explains that. It was not an ending worth fighting for, and it was certainly not satisfying. The dialogue wasn't much better either. Whoever wrote the dialogue for a lot of the side characters didn't care to give them distinct personalities, and had them say very obscure things that you could never imagine anyone saying, and using a lot of real-life words that aren't common at all in the Shadowrun setting or in real life. And the biggest issue that plagued Shadowrun Returns is back again, but this time in a dozen more ways. Can you guess it? Bugs! Since we're on the topic of dialogue, let's start with dialogue bugs. For one, there's a very boring side character that hangs out in a bar who repeats her introduction twice. Why? I don't know. She intros when you meet her, and then a few hours later if you go back to her, she'll intro again. This was a little more than slightly annoying because her intro is actually really long, and you can't just back out of the conversation. You have to click all the way through it, which takes about a minute. After that, we have broken dialogue, everyone's favorite type of dialogue bug. There are several accounts I experienced of dialogue that were just completely missing. I had an optional objective to complete late into the game where I had to retrieve something for somebody, but after getting it for them, the person only looked at me and said, "Well?" with no option for me to hand her anything. After looking it up, I found out she was supposed to tell me about it first, so I reloaded to try to see if talking to her before getting it would help, but no, nothing. It's a broken side objective, and there's more than one in Dragonfall. Then there's the occasional graphical bug. Most of that revolves around how characters stand in the game, I think. Maybe it's just the 2D art, but there's a lot of examples of characters just looking like their legs are broken or spun around for some reason. Clicking on NPCs doesn't always work correctly. Sometimes it moves you to them instead of starting dialogue or attacking. Sometimes you need to click twice to do what you want to do. It's a stupid bug from Returns, but it's far more prominent in Dragonfall for some reason. Shamans and Riggers are also bugged in this expansion sequel thing. Shamans will occasionally randomly gain an AP that they shouldn't have while maintaining a summoned creature for a few rounds before it disappears again. Riggers will occasionally lose an AP as if they were maintaining a second drone, even though they only have one. Mission items get broken less than halfway into the game, which cause certain items to get stuck in your inventory for the rest of the game, even if you have already completed the relevant quests. It's most likely to happen with a penthouse code that you receive on a side quest. And lastly, towards the end of the game, your main computer terminal where you take on jobs and check your messages gets bugged and reads one new message for the last 4 hours of the game, even though you have no new mail. Oh yeah, and when you start the game, there's a chance it may break on you. I almost forgot that one. When I first started it, I hit new game and was greeted by a black screen. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. It may sound like I've been very harsh on this game, or it may just sound like this game sucks, but I don't really know how to highlight the fact that the game was still enjoyable despite all of these issues. Do I think it was a better game than Returns? Yes. Do I think it deserves a higher score? No. I gave Returns an 8 out of 10 because it was a fun game with barely any bugs or issues. Dragonfall may be better at its core, but it's also so much buggier and has so many more issues and bad design choices that I can't justify giving it a higher score. Not even the same score. So Shadowrun Dragonfall gets a 6 out of 10 for me. With all of its issues, it was enjoyable, but by the end of the game, you'll find yourself so tired of all its crap. You won't even want to try any of the mods, whereas playing the user-generated content was one of the pros I gave to Returns for extending the life of the game. Do I recommend Dragonfall? Sure. If you can put up with all these problems, go ahead and buy it. I know I still had fun despite them. I'm glad I played it, but not so glad of the state it's in. And since none of these issues will ever get fixed, it's entirely up to you to decide whether or not you can put up with them as I did. Or as I barely did. If you want to see more gaming content here on Konglomerat, then make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next Res Reviews.